The Doomslayer is essentially a super soldier. A space marine with superhuman abilities who can run super fast, react with super speed, fall from great heights without taking damage, and carry large amounts of ammo. Oh, and he also rips demons' heads off and shoves them down their throats. And as though that wasn't already enough, he then chose to stay in hell to battle demons indefinitely. So yeah, he's kind of a badass. What can we take from this though and apply to a useful, functional workout? Actually, a surprising amount. But just a quick disclaimer, as with many of these fictional character-inspired workouts, I'm using this as a fun way to discuss some cool training concepts and ideas. I'm presenting them here for your further research and consideration, rather than as recommendations. These are out there approaches that may have some benefit for the wider population, but I'm certainly not claiming these are ideas for everyone, nor does this represent a complete training program or prescription. Think of it as a thought experiment, and take from it what you will. So the Doomslayer is a Marine, so the foundation of this training should be inspired by military training. And this actually translates perfectly to the traits that we just listed, seeing as the military favour strength endurance, mental toughness, and the ability to carry heavy loads. Sound familiar? One of the best methods that the military use to train these features specifically is rucking. Rucking involves taking a heavy load, strapping it to your back, and then walking long distances. Often this is more like a light jog though, on uneven terrain. The simple fact is that infantry need to be able to perform while carrying heavy guns and lots of equipment. This is doubly true for Doomguy, who seems to carry around an entire arsenal on his back. Rucking, of course, is one of the best ways to develop and to test this ability. Rucking will build that mental endurance as well as cardiovascular fitness, strength endurance, and even hip and ankle stability as you adapt to the uneven ground. It burns a ton of calories. In one study, walking with added weight burned 12% more calories than just walking alone, and it's relatively safe as long as you build up to it gradually. A good recommendation is to start with roughly 10% of your body weight. If you're more experienced with training, then of course you can go significantly above this weight rapidly, but start light to get a feel for it. This is also a great option for incidental training. If you have to walk somewhere, throw on a heavy backpack or a weighted vest and get some extra bang for your buck. 30 minutes is a good amount of time to start with, but you can aim to increase the distance you cover in this time. And whilst we're carrying heavy stuff, I'd also argue that our Doomslayer workout could benefit from adding farmers' walks and other forms of loaded carries. This basically means picking up something heavy, holding onto it and walking a distance. This excellent form of training builds grip strength, which is useful for ripping demons' jaws off, and if we use one-sided carries like the suitcase carry, then we'll also be able to build anti-lateral flexion in the core and strengthen the obliques. Vary walking with a heavy bag, rucking, and carrying something, and that way you'll build even more robust and rugged performance. Take it onto uneven terrain for even more devastating strength and conditioning. In fact, this is starting to look a lot like something that a user recently shared with the patrons-only Bioneers group on Facebook recently, the Sprint Drag Carry, or SDC. This is a test of strength endurance and anaerobic capacity, and it's one of 6 events used in the Army Combat Fitness Test. Here, soldiers will sprint to a 25-metre mark and then back. Grab a 90-pound sled and then drag it backwards to and from the 25-metre line, making sure that the entire sled crosses the line each time. And then perform a lateral dash sideways to and from the line. Finally, they run to and from the line again while holding 2 40-pound kettlebells. They then finish on a final sprint. You can try this yourself by finding a field and using a heavy bag attached to a rope. Mark the distance with cones. And for those interested, the other 5 events in the Army Combat Fitness Test consist of 3 repetition maximum deadlift, standing power throw, which is launching a medicine ball overhead and behind you, hand release push-ups, which are push-ups where you raise your hands from the ground at the bottom of each movement, thus losing any momentum. The leg tuck is effectively a tuck front lever but for reps, whilst using a commando neutral pull-up grip, and a 2-mile run, and then of course the sprint drag carry itself. This is actually a pretty interesting combination of functional movements, and they'd be right at home in a Doomslayer workout. The SDC has a bunch of unique benefits in itself though. For one, it's a form of what's known as cardio acceleration. There's my love of training methods with awesome names again. Cardio acceleration basically means performing some form of cardiovascular training, aerobic or anaerobic, between sets of resistance training, rather than resting. So this keeps the heart rate high during your resistance training, and it therefore burns a ton of calories and really tests your endurance. And it's also just grueling. Of course, it's not ideal for primarily strength or hypertrophy oriented training, as it does limit the amount you can lift. For our purposes here, Energizer Bunny style ripping and tearing, it's perfect. I would also warn against using cardio acceleration alongside technical or very heavy lifts. We don't want to be performing deadlifts whilst exhausted for obvious reasons. As an added bonus, the backwards drag is also great for the knees, as any fans of Ben Patrick knees over toes guy will know. I would argue that you could also place a crawling drag in here for extra credit. A crawling drag works the upper and lower body in a way that translates to faster sprinting and a stronger core. It's also great for coordinated movement of the limbs, and it's a concentric only exercise, meaning that there's minimal muscle damage, allowing you to train harder whilst keeping recovery time short. Another form of training that's used regularly in the military is high rep calisthenics. That means high reps of push-ups, pull-ups, and the classic burpees, which I just made a video on recently. They can be trained for high repetitions with minimal risk of injury, as long as you're in good shape to begin with. They are once again perfect for improving strength endurance and work capacity. A Doomslayer workout shouldn't be about lifting something really heavy once, but rather being able to exert lots of strength for a long amount of time without tiring out or losing power. This is simply more useful and practical in a real-world setting. Burpees are a hybrid exercise that use both the upper and lower body. This increases the heart rate significantly, as blood needs to get to the muscles on the opposite sides of the body, while also building a lot of stability as you move between positions. And because burpees are explosive, they encourage fast, powerful movement. And we can make this even tougher by adding a little extra weight. In one cool study, it was found that oxygen consumption was increased by an impressive 100% during military-style training programs, using a weighted vest. Alternatively, you can make a burpee more challenging by holding dumbbells and adding a shoulder press at the end, and this is what we call a devil press. Again, I discussed this in my video on burpees. The name devil press certainly seems appropriate for a Doomslayer workout. And in fact, hybrid exercises make a lot of sense in general, because they teach dynamic movement, especially when fatigued. If we're going to be grappling with demons though, then we also need rotational strength. The good news is that there are countless different variations on the burpee or devil press that we can incorporate for similar benefits. Again, I listed loads of these in the recent video. The Manmaker, for example, is like a devil press, but with a renegade row added in. Then there are the one-legged burpees. There are kicking burpees, dead stop burpees, mountain climber burpees, side burpees, single arm burpees, spider burpees, skater jump burpees, lateral jumping burpees, broad jump burpees, punching burpees. The list goes on. And if you want to take this to the next level, then you can set yourself the challenge of performing any mixture of these alongside regular push-ups. This becomes something like a flow, but instead of a movement flow, it's more like an explosive calisthenics or athletic flow. We see flows used a lot in kettlebell training as well, and this is also where we see a lot of hybrid exercises. For example, you might flow from a kettlebell swing, to a clean, to a press, to a kneeling get-up. The kettlebell similarly lends itself perfectly to training strength endurance and explosiveness. But even better is that training with flows like this, or any sequence of movement, creates more need for decision-making and focus. The awesome thing about playing the new Doom games in particular is that they force you to think like the Doomslayer. These are intense battles that don't let up. They require expert resource management, target prioritization, visual processing, focus and tactics. I highly suspect that Doom Eternal in particular may actually be a very useful form of brain training. We know from research that any first-person shooter has a lot of benefits for the brain, but I genuinely believe that Doom Eternal steps it up a notch. And this is where more complex sequences of movements have an edge over simple repetitions, because they force you to focus and they force you to think about your next movement. Give yourself a string of movements to perform, such as a kick through left, kick through right, burpee, 100 up, 45-degree bound in each direction, burpee, repeat. While this isn't particularly complex, you're now having to focus carefully on the movements and keep track of what you've already done if you're going to complete the sequence correctly. You just can't let your mind wander. I've also discussed in the past how training movements in a more random order can actually improve skill acquisition and retention. If you're training for basketball, say, it makes sense to practice a dribble, a pass, and a shot, rather than chunking those actions together as separate drills. And this makes sense. It forces you to concentrate, and it's exactly how you really use those skills in competition. This is another reason that performing 3 sets of 10 isolation movements may be a little outmoded. The technical term is contextual interference, and it's worth looking up. Keep in mind though that contextual interference is very much dependent on the nature of the skill, the level of the trainee, and a lot more. And with all that said, we could even go a step further. What if we were to throw in brain training between sets? If you have 1 minute to recover between sets, why not spend that minute doing a dual end-back test, or some version of the Wisconsin card sorting test, or perhaps a Stroop task? Not only is this a time-efficient way to train both body and mind, but it also trains you to think clearly and calmly during high stress, in this case physiological stress, which can act as a kind of stand-in for emotional stress. This is one of the differentiators when it comes to optimal athletic performance, and if there ever is a real crisis, your ability to think clearly, even though you're highly stressed, is what's going to make all the difference. I mean, imagine if Doomguy was just whimpering in the corner or just overwhelmed and distracted. He'd hardly be the cool character that we think of him as. I've also suggested in the past that using some form of stop and go test to begin the next set could be an effective way to incorporate brain training. In other words, a third party gives you a signal to begin the next movement, or a dummy, and you have to react accordingly. This calls to mind the military's use of the hooded box test, an exercise that involves placing a trainee under a hood that completely blocks their vision and hearing. The hood is then suddenly removed to reveal an unexpected scenario. This could be a combat scenario or an old lady asking for the time. The job of the trainee is then to respond appropriately and to display situational awareness, and it also desensitizes them to the fear response over time. One study found that a combination of a stop signal task, a go-no-go task, Stroop task, and visual search task could be effective at reducing civilian casualties among military personnel. In short, incorporating brain training in these ways could well be an effective method for building a truly unstoppable machine like Doomguy. And I'd like to end with a fun idea, training in heat. Of course, Doomguy got most of his training in hell, which is famously hot. And this could actually have an interesting impact on a person's performance. You see, DARPA actually has a history of trying to create super soldiers. Check out my old post on the Metabolically Dominant Soldier program, which is a really awesome name again. One method they experimented with was using cooling gloves to enhance performance. This works by improving thermal regulation in the individual and thus preventing overheating during training. Without the use of cooling gloves, one interesting option that might be available could be to train with a sauna suit. In one study, it was found that training in a sauna suit could lead to improvements in VO2 max, ventilatory threshold, and thermal regulation. We often think about sauna suits in relation to weight loss, but it seems that there might be some significant performance benefits too. This is all pretty hypothetical, and it likely wouldn't have enough of an effect to be worth it for most people, but it could explain why the Doomslayer is so unrelenting. Finally, I do also think that a Doomslayer workout should incorporate some heavy lifting. A power day of big lifts would fit in here really nicely. After all, Doomguy is strong, and it's that combination of amazing strength with grit, focus and endurance that makes him truly unstoppable. So I hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, please leave a like and share it around. That really does help me out, and I appreciate it so much. Let me know in the comments how you would program a Doomslayer workout. If you like this kind of mind-body training for human performance, then you might like to check out my ebook and training program, Super Functional Training. The program is designed to improve every aspect of human performance, from mobility to strength to explosiveness to focus to decision making and more. There's a link below, and it's on discount whilst we're all struggling with the pandemic. I also have an actual print book called Functional Training and Beyond. That's an introduction to the concept of functional training and super functional training as they pertain to the general population. It has loads of examples of incredible human performance. Whatever the case, thank you so much for watching this one and for all your support. Subscribe if you want to see more like this, and hit the bell notification button to make sure you don't miss future videos. Thanks guys, and bye for now.